Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he sees positive movement in cooperation with the U.S. Could this mark the beginning of an end to U.S.-Ukraine tensions, or are we not out of the woods yet? President Trump welcomed Ukraine's willingness to push the minerals deal, but what could come next? More on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Germany considers changing its constitution to aid domestic armament. Polish government conducts deportations of foreign gang members. Hollywood actor receives citizenship from Polish President Andrzej Duda. Donald Trump's acknowledgment of Ukraine in his congressional address may not have seemed long, but it was substantial. The U.S. president appreciated President Zelensky's message, which expressed his desire for peace and willingness to resume negotiations. After days of tensions following the Washington spat and a suspension of aid and intelligence to Ukraine, could this spell a positive change for Ukraine and the U.S.? Ovidiusz Nicieja has more on the story.
It's time to end this senseless war.
Donald Trump says he appreciates Ukraine's declarations of readiness for peace and cooperation with America. In his address to Congress, the U.S. president quoted his Ukrainian counterpart.
Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago.
What Trump said was a letter from Zelenskyy were also the exact words of the Ukrainian president's earlier post on X.
The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer.
Ukrainian officials were eager to point this out.
President Donald Trump read our President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's post in his address to the nation and said, I appreciate that he wrote this letter.
Whether you call it a letter or a post, what Trump read out were Zelensky's words, and they hint that the so-called mineral deal is not dead just yet.
I think the president is still committed to the mineral deal. I think we've heard some positive things, but not yet, of course, a signature from our friends in Ukraine. But look, the mineral deal is a really important part of the president's policy.
Although few details of the potential agreement are known, the deal is expected to welcome American companies to extract Ukrainian rare earth minerals. It also aims to create a special fund for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The renewed possibility of its signing was welcomed in Central Eastern Europe.
I see the minerals deal as the most realistic and strongest security guarantee for Ukraine right now.
At the moment, Ukraine is not receiving aid from the United States. Since taking office, Donald Trump has called his Ukrainian counterpart a dictator and engaged in an argument with him at the White House.
We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment.
This was highlighted in the opposition's rebuttal to the congressional address.
After the spectacle that just took place in the Oval Office last week, Reagan must be rolling in his grave.
Senator Slotkin has said that under Trump, the U.S. would have lost the Cold War.
He believes in cozying up to dictators like Vladimir Putin.
But not everyone is as pessimistic.
We still have not seen anything, quote, given to Russia. In fact, a few days ago, the Trump administration extended sanctions against the Russian enemy. Until we see Ukraine handed over to anyone, and Ukraine will not be handed over to anyone, especially the Russian enemy, let's see what unfolds.
To make absolutely sure that Ukraine is not handed over to Russia, several European countries have intensified their diplomatic efforts. A spokesperson for the French government has said that President Emmanuel Macron is considering traveling to Washington once again, but this time alongside President Zelenskyy and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
The suspension of military aid was not the only way in which the U.S. administration withdrew its support for Ukraine. Earlier on Wednesday, the CIA director broke the news that the U.S. would be suspending its intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Joining me now is our correspondent in Kyiv, Os Katerji. Good evening, Os. So what more do we know so far about this new suspension, and how will it affect Ukraine's military movements?
Well, Ukrainian officials were learning about it in real time on Wednesday as this story unfolded, with that final confirmation. Still, parts of the government weren't aware of this. That final confirmation coming from CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Now, he did say something interesting about that once he confirmed it. He said The pause, I think, will go away once there has been some movement towards a peace deal. This goes further than the mineral deal signing. You know, this is beyond that. Just because Zelenskyy eventually signs this deal doesn't necessarily mean that this intelligence sharing is going to come on. We had that again from Mike Waltz, Trump's national security advisor, saying Trump will reconsider restoring these assistances if peace talks are arranged. Now, clearly the Zelenskyy administration here is trying carefully to calibrate its message. That letter written to Trump being the prime example of that, to try and get the US administration on board with the way Ukraine sees ending this war on their terms. However, these proposals, these ideas are going a lot further. The pressure that the US is putting on Ukraine goes a lot further than just signing this mineral deal. Now, we hear from Zelenskyy himself saying that we are preparing a plan of first steps to bring about a just and sustainable peace. The Zelenskyy administration clearly is thinking about those plans, those proposals that they need to bring back to Trump to show to him that they are serious about engaging in peace talks. Meanwhile, Russia continues to bombard Ukraine. And this intelligence sharing, this is the critical part. It affects not only targeting weapon systems like HIMARS that now Ukrainian positions won't be able to fire deep into Russian lines using these HIMARS because the targeting technology is being withheld, but also the missile threat warnings. When Russia launches these big ballistic missiles towards Ukraine, they are no longer going to get the intelligence sharing from the US about these threats. The question now is, can Europe provide this kind of intel sharing, because they are still plugged into the American intelligence networks? Will they provide it to Ukraine despite this block coming from the US? And how long will this US block last? And how many Ukrainian lives will it cost if they are unable to defend their skies from the incoming Russian threats they have been warned about using US intelligence up until this point today?
Definitely a lot of questions, very little answers. Oz, please keep us updated. This was Oz Chatterjee reporting live from Kyiv. Major changes are on the horizon for Europe's most powerful economy, Germany. The new chancellor-in-waiting, Friedrich Merz, wants to effectively exempt defense spending from the country's constitutional fiscal restraints. With elections a little over 10 days ago, this would provide a massive boost to the country's defense and infrastructure. However, constitutional change is needed, which presents a political hurdle. Sascha Farbach reports.
Friedrich Merz, chancellor in the wings, is not waiting around on making bold announcements. The potential new German coalition is not yet official, but there's already a major overhaul planned which could redefine the German defense industry, just as doubts linger about America's support for Europe.
The CDU, CSU and SPD will therefore be submitting a motion to the German Bundestag next week. I want to say this very clearly. In view of the threats to our freedom and peace on our continent, the same must now apply to our defense, whatever it takes.
In an unprecedented move, Merz suggested that defense spending exceeding 1% of GDP could be excluded from Germany's debt brake rule, which limits the structural budget deficit 0.35% of GDP, except in emergency circumstances. Experts say this has long been overdue and could be a boon to the armaments industry.
Putting the debt brake aside is something that many of our neighbors and partners in the European Union have been hoping for a long time, because they found German stinginess, German fiscal conservatism, very disturbing and actually damaging for growth in Europe.
This move would potentially free up billions for defense at a time when Europe needs to step up, given the growing rift in the traditional transatlantic bond with the United States.
Europe as a whole needs to very, very quickly and decisively ramp up its defense spending, its industrial capacity for arms production, and its assistance for Ukraine.
The new plans, however, require a change to the German constitution. Both the upper house and the lower house need to vote on any amendments and require a two-thirds majority. With elections just over a week ago, the political timing is tricky, as the new parliament provides the opposition the chance to throw a spanner in the works.
In the new Bundestag, the left and the right, the far right, the fringe forces on the left and the right, have a blocking majority. So against their will, the constitution, our basic law, cannot be amended.
Although elections secured a win for Mr. Merz's conservatives and a coalition with the center-left SPD looks likely, the new potential government in Berlin could struggle with attaining the two-third majority needed, as support from the Greens also remains uncertain. Yet experts hail it as a revolution in German fiscal policy.
For the first time in decades, Germany is heavily investing, or is allowing its government to invest heavily into defense and spending and taking debt for billions of money to reach not just the 2% threshold, but we're looking at 3%. These amendments allow the German government to spend and do whatever it takes to rearm Germany and defend Europe. And this is big news for everyone involved.
The process to make these changes could take weeks. However, with the uncertainty surrounding Donald Trump's presidency, Berlin seems to have been spurred into action. While coalition talks continue, Germany could be on the brink of stepping up to its role just when Europe needs it most. Sascha Farbach, TVP World.
Yet Germany is not the only European country that is seriously considering major changes to accommodate its rearmament needs. In less than 24 hours, European leaders will meet in Brussels for an extraordinary European summit centered on shoring up support for Ukraine, as well as bolstering European defense. We are joined by our EU correspondent Angela Skujins in Brussels. Good evening, Angela. So what makes tomorrow so significant for EU affairs?
Yes, so what we've heard from one senior EU official is that tomorrow could truly turn a page when it comes to European defence. Those 27 EU heads of states will convene in Brussels tomorrow for a double docket affair. Ukrainian defence as well as European security sit at the top of that agenda. It comes, as we've heard, US President Donald Trump pausing military aid deliveries to Ukraine, signalling that he will no longer support the EU when it comes to its security needs. This is why this matter is so urgent. On Wednesday, we heard the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, her plan to rearm Europe. The major instrument there is a €150 billion investment package. The aim is for member states to supercharge their military capabilities to shore up defence production. Another part of this package, which will be voted on tomorrow by those leaders, is loosening up EU fiscal rules so that member states can spend roughly 1.5% of their GDP more on their military needs without falling foul of the EU's fiscal rules, such as Poland, which has been targeted by an excessive deficit procedure by the bloc. This proposal was warmly welcomed by officials in Warsaw. This includes Poland's Minister for State Assets, Jakub Jarobowski. Here is what he had to say from the Polish capital today.
Today, in the face of current threats, the demand for weapons, military equipment and ammunition is gigantic around the world. Our arms industry must take advantage of this. It must take advantage of this because it is key to our defense, but also because it's a massive development opportunity.
Yes, so we've also heard this ratcheting up of support from the EU executives here in Brussels. This includes the president of the European Investment Bank, Nina Calvinia. She told attendees at a conference today in Brussels that she will do whatever it takes to ramp up defence spending through her own institution. Here is what she had to say.
We're ready to do more. As I have already informed EU leaders yesterday, we will propose to the upcoming Board of Directors meeting on March 21st that the EIB Group further expands its eligibilities to ensure that excluded activities are more precisely defined and as limited as possible in scope.
Yes, so member states will also discuss and potentially vote on what the security guarantees the EU can offer if a ceasefire is brokered between Ukraine and Russia. What we're hearing from sources in Brussels that it would be an understatement to say that member states are concerned about the US's actions in Ukraine, the halting of military aid there. But the purpose of tomorrow's summit is to show Ukraine that the EU is serious in its support. This is why the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy Zelenskyy will attend these conferences in person. But the major issue here, the thorniest part of this, is convincing member states such as Hungary and Slovakia to vote in support of these measures. This is why the French President Emmanuel Macron will host Viktor Orban, Hungary's Prime Minister, in the French capital, Paris, tonight. Many see this as an opportunity for that European leader to try and convince that Central European country, the leader of that country, to vote in support of these measures. So wait and see if any formal outcomes come out of tomorrow's discussions. If not, they will be hammered out further at another European Council summit at the end of the month.
Thank you so much, Angela. Angela Skujins live from Brussels. The day has finally arrived where members of Georgian gangs are being deported from Poland. This is part of a larger operation aimed at combating foreign gangs by the Polish government and the police force. This initiative, however, is not new, as similar deportations took place in 2024, expelling thousands. Franciszek Pilis has this report.
Following up on an earlier post on social media, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced a mass deportation of Georgian gangs from Poland, attaching a video of the country's border guard transporting those arrested to an airport for a quick departure.
There is no place in our country for people who break Polish law. Whether it's petty theft, break-ins and robberies, taking part in drug or gun trade, or being a part of an organized crime group, we don't tolerate it. And we will not tolerate anyone committing any crimes in Poland.
This isn't exactly a new initiative, as Polish police data shows the number of deportations in 2024 was counted in the thousands.
We deported 8,000 people last year. That's a lot. It's not an insignificant number. Add to that we have hundreds of people in jail.
Since the beginning of 2025, more than 2,600 foreigners have been charged with committing crimes in Poland, including theft, illegally crossing the Polish border, and organized crime activities. In February, a joint border guard and police unit carried out an action aimed at combating the illegal migration of foreigners. More than 1,400 people were detained, and a deportation procedure was initiated against 398 of them.
Is one of Poland's key harbors, the port of Gdynia, going to face partial ownership changes? CK Hutchinson, a company that used to run key ports along the Panama Canal with a number of assets in Poland, sold its majority stakes to U.S. investors. This move follows Donald Trump's efforts to, quote, reclaim the Panama Canal. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
To further enhance our national security, my administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it.
As he said, so he did. Under the order of US President Trump, consortium made out of BlackRock Investment Company and its subsidiaries, Global Infrastructure Partners and Terminal Investment Limited, signed an agreement in principle with Chinese-owned Hong Kong-based conglomerate CK Hutchinson for the purchase of 90% shares in the ports located in the Panama Canal.
This is a great power struggle. Definitely, Chinese companies, they are building the network of maritime infrastructure, helping China to control sea lines of communication.
The deal, estimated at $23 billion, will also include the buyout of Hutchison's 80% stake in the 44 ports across 23 countries. This is poised to include the port of Gdynia, one of Poland's 4 strategically vital ports operated by a subsidiary of the Chinese conglomerate called Hutchison Ports Holding. Security concerns have repeatedly been raised over the ownership hands. The terminal is located opposite to the Polish armament group's naval shipyard.
The port of Gdynia is the largest naval base where warships vital to Poland's defense are being built. So from a national security perspective, it would be good if the entities operating in the area were Poland's allies.
The port has also taken on new importance since the full-scale Russian invasion began in 2022.
At a time of great tension in our region, Gdynia serves as the main port of transit for the transfer of American soldiers and equipment to Ukraine.
The issues surrounding Hutchison's presence in Gdynia also relate to instances of interference with access to the port. In August 2023, equipment for the American Army was to be unloaded on a dock near the Gdynia container terminal. As the ship's bow protruded into Hutchison's zone, the company refused to consent to the unloading.
It's definitely the reaction, because China's role nowadays in Baltic Sea is first to provide support, but to some extent, I would say, also provide the legitimization of Russia's invasion.
TVP World reached out to the port of Gdynia, which refused to comment on matters relating to BlackRock Consortium's plans to buy CK Hutchinson. The definitive agreement is scheduled to be signed by April 2nd.
American actor Jesse Eisenberg, best known for his portrayal of Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, and now a creator of A Real Pain, a cinematic love letter to Poland, has officially received his Polish citizenship from President Andrzej Duda. Michiel van Blumestein has more.
Jesse Eisenberg received his citizenship on grounds of his ancestors, who emigrated to the United States from Poland and Ukraine. His most recent movie, A Real Pain, about two Jewish cousins discovering their Polish roots, was filmed across Poland.
I was walking the streets and starting to get a little more comfortable in the country. It occurred to me that something so obvious occurred to me, which is that my family had lived in this place for far longer than we've lived in New York.
Eisenberg also expressed his appreciation for the Łódź Film School and the historians and educators who work at the former Nazi German extermination camp of Majdanek, which is located near present-day Lublin in eastern Poland.
On the eve of the Special European Council set to take place in Brussels on Thursday, Europe is on the precipice of a new age of armament. According to one of our senior EU official insiders, Thursday will truly turn a page on European defense. How is the EU going to navigate the new rearmament plan, aid to Ukraine, vulnerable relations with the US, and other burning issues? Joining me now in the studio is Ivan Korczak, former Slovakian foreign minister, to discuss these. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thanks for having me.
One of the big points of tomorrow's meeting and the announcement that was made yesterday is the plan of rearmament presented by Ursula von der Leyen. How do you assess the feasibility of this plan when it comes to Europe?
I'll respond immediately, but with your permission, I take my 30 seconds to make two remarks. Number one, it's right, I'm former foreign minister of Slovakia, but at this moment, I'm member of the leading opposition party in Slovakia. And for me, it is very important to reach out a message to both politicians in Poland and Poland public that there is alternative in Slovakia. And I'm stressing that because current government has completely shifted the foreign policy focus of Slovakia. And I'm mentioning that because I think it's important for Poland as well. So please, Polish friends, remember, we are alternative, and once there is election, be it early election or in a regular term, we will bring Slovakia back on pro-European track. That's number one. And second,
a very important message indeed.
And second, madam, very important. I've been in diplomacy of Slovakia for 30 years, and I've been visiting 100 times almost, when I exaggerate, Poland. I want to congratulate Poland and Polish citizens on the progress this country has made over the last 10, 15 years, because it's tangible. When I'm traveling from Warsaw to Olsztyn, you can grasp it, you can feel it, that this country is growing, that you have improved infrastructure, and you are a very good example for us. So those are the two points that I wanted to make at the beginning. But you've asked me whether I assess a realism behind this proposal and feasibility. You know, I would divide my response into two parts. Number one, first, we have to recognize reality as it is, and it has changed dramatically over the last few weeks. This is the most important thing.
The circumstance is different.
Exactly. So it's a new era that we are entering at this moment, and I think, and I remain optimistic that when you look at the history of European Union, we've been delivering always when Europe was faced with a major existential challenge and crisis. And this is right now. This is at this moment. So politically, I think there is a good basis to finally deliver on what we have been talking about for decades. So European Union or Europe needs to do more for its own defense at this moment.
But can it do more?
Sorry?
But can it do more?
Yes, absolutely. And it will be more costly. We have to act fast. what will convince the enemy and the threat is not the words, but deeds. Ursula von der Leyen said that. And we have now a positive window of opportunity. When it comes to details of this proposal, I don't think we need to deep dive into that and bother the audience with details. It will be worked out. But for me, the starting point is the recognition of a new reality where finally there is an opportunity for us Europeans to take destiny in our own hands. And in addition, I think it's valid for Poland, for Slovakia, for other countries as well. We need to convince our citizens and get their backing and support for more spending. Because whether we like it or not, it will be a costly undertaking. But in view of threat that we are facing, in view of continued aggression of Russia against Ukraine, there is no other option.
I would also like to take a look at Ukraine, because we've heard about the suspension of military aid for Ukraine. Now we heard about the intelligence sharing suspension as of today, as of earlier today on Wednesday. Do you think that if the deal, the minerals deal, would be signed by Ukraine with the US, those suspensions would be taken back?
I hope so. Nevertheless, I could use more diplomatic words, but I think should it stay as it is, I mean, that the military aid would be suspended, it would be a major setback. Let's talk, let's face reality again. The support, the military support that the United States has been delivering from day one of aggression was extremely important, and Ukraine needs that. So I think at this moment, and this is the more optimistic part, I hope we can help President Zelenskyy repair his relationship with President Trump. And at the end of the day, we Europeans will successfully convince the United States that it is also in their interest to continue the military and financial and other support for Ukraine. Because with Ukraine, at the end of the day, the security of entire Europe is at stake.
What do you think is going to be the factor that the European Union is actually going to put forward to Donald Trump's administration in order to get him interested and have him stay and support not only Ukraine, but also the European defense? Because that's also in question now.
I don't think that this time we can convince him just with declarations. It was over the last 10, 15 years that we Europeans have been declaring our major ambition to act on our own and do more for our European defense. This time, we have to act very quickly. And therefore, I think that this proposal of Ursula von der Leyen is timely. I'm not saying that everything is fine and everything is absolutely clear. Details will be very important. But politically, we have to have a message and bring it across to Washington, D.C., that European taxpayers are ready to pay more, that Europeans can very quickly develop military and defense capabilities, and those will be the heavy arguments that I believe we need to bring across to Washington, because it's not because Donald Trump is pushy and he asks us to do more. It's about our own survival. So it's Polish interest, it's Slovak interest, it's European interest that Europe can do more in the area of defense. There is no other option at this moment.
How do you think different member states within the EU are going to align themselves in order to be able to reach a common goal of rearming? We've heard about Germany, we've heard about Friedrich Merz and the strategy that he's planning to take, even possibly involving changes in the constitution. How do you think those European members are going to play this out to make it work?
I think that's, again, the positive moment that even in Germany, for example, there was a taboo theme at this moment, for example, to create more fiscal space for more spending for defense. I think we are moving. I cannot tell you at this moment, what position of 27 member states will be. But I hope, because I'm a Slovak politician, but I hope that the current government, which we are criticizing back home, will be constructive on this. And again, Poland is the best example, I dare say, in Europe, because it was not because of this crisis, but because of Polish attitude to your own national defense, that you are spending at this moment almost 5%. The United States is not spending 5%. President Trump is asking Europeans to spend at least 5%, but Poland is delivering. So I think this is yet another point where we have to take a good example from what the Polish government, but what Polish citizens are recognizing as a need, which has no alternative for the country.
Ahead of the meeting taking place in Brussels, the exceptional meeting, we've heard about French President Emmanuel Macron, and we've heard about Viktor Orban, Hungary's Viktor Orban, the l'enfant terrible of Europe, as he's been called before. What do you think is the political significance, and what could this meeting potentially change ahead of the decision-making process potentially taking place tomorrow?
I hope a lot will change after this meeting of President Macron with Prime Minister Orban, because you know that I think it was already last week where Prime Minister Orban has signaled officially and publicly that he's not ready to agree to the proposed text of Council conclusions. He's not ready to basically sign up to anything more than the United Nations resolution. At this moment, what Europe needs is 27 member states on board and coming together and supporting unequivocally Ukraine militarily, economically, and financially. You asked me about Prime Minister Orban, but I'm very concerned about our Prime Minister.
Which was supposed to be my next question.
I'm not in Poland to complain about them, but it is reality that our Prime Minister, Slovak Prime Minister Fico, has threatened publicly with veto should there be any commitment to continuing support for Ukraine. I think it's a major damage that could be inflicted basically to our own European position, because it's at the end, once again, the world is changing as we speak at this moment. But one thing is not changing at this moment, that with Ukrainian destiny of an entire continent is at stake. And therefore I hope President Macron will be successful, will get Prime Minister Orban on board, and in 2 days, when summit ends, we'll have a unified position of European Union. We cannot afford now playing games, because it's an existential moment for us.
Definitely, those 2 coming days will be a dawn of new time for Europe, not only when it comes to defense, but when it comes to diplomacy and politics. Thank you so much, Ivan Korczok, for joining me here in the studio. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back on TVP World with more news and features in just a moment.